A friend told me that I should make these videos more inviting for newcomers, so to any new viewers, this is a video series I do called Watching Every Ghibli Movie, where I watch every Studio Ghibli movie, and give my relatively unanalytical thoughts on them. I've already done 23 of these, so if you want to hear me talk about a Ghibli movie, chances are I have already done it, and if not, I will get around to it. Link to the full playlist is in the description, and for this installment, I watched Lupin III Cagliostro no Shiro, or Lupin III Castle of Cagliostro, from way back in 1979, back before Studio Ghibli was even founded. However, this movie is often considered part of the Ghibli library in spirit because it was Hayao Miyazaki's directorial debut, so I'm covering it here. Spoilers as always, and let's get started. Fun fact, this movie is my 200th completed anime according to my anime list, for whatever that's worth. I'd been wanting to watch Castle of Cagliostro for a while, but what finally made me do it was just seeing clips of it in tons of YouTube videos, and I'd have to look away so I didn't get spoiled on anything. And I'm glad I did, because there are some fantastic cuts in this film. I was immediately floored by just how much fun the opening minutes of the film are, the sound effect they play when Lupin and Jigen are jumping in sync with each other, the throwing the money out of the car as they drive, that vaporwave-looking pink sea, just immediately tons of fun. The other thing that immediately struck me was that Lupin had to have at least somewhat inspired Cowboy Bebop. I had just finished it for the first time before watching this film, so it was on my mind. You got two rebels of the system just traveling the world/galaxy who also help miscellaneous people they come into contact with because it's the right thing to do. And Jigen just reminds me so much of Jet. Someone confirm or disprove this for me, I'm too lazy. Anyway, my enjoyment of the audio-video presentation of this movie extends beyond just the first few scenes. I really like the what sounds like early synth music similar to Nazca of the Valley of the Wind. I don't know if Miyazaki just liked the instrumentation, or if the same composer worked on both films, or why the studio switched over to the softer pianos and strings and seemingly never looked back, but I kinda wish they had kept this musical style in their vocabulary. I really would have liked to see how it could have evolved, because I don't feel like I've heard much that sounds like it, though maybe I just haven't seen enough old anime. I think maybe The Ocean Waves has something similar going on, but I don't really remember. I feel like I'm noticing a possible trend with Miyazaki movies, which is that they often center around a big, important setting or location that is super well mapped out, which really makes it feel like you're in a place you could imagine walking around in and not getting lost. Yubaba's bathhouse from Spirited Away, the castle in the sky from Castle in the Sky, and the town on the beach from Ponyo are obvious examples, and I definitely think those movies presented their setting stronger than Castle of Cagliostro in this way, but it's really interesting to see how this may have been an interest of Hayao's from much earlier in his career that he got the opportunity to iterate and improve upon. Another connection I noticed between this film and later Miyazaki's was the intricate ways in which Lupin climbs up on the castle wall and rooftop, which felt very similar to how Pazu from Castle in the Sky would climb all over and under the castle walls in that movie. I remember commenting on that when I talked about Castle in the Sky, though I don't remember if I mentioned that the way he climbs reminds me of how Link from Breath of the Wild climbs surfaces in that game. It's super fun, and oh boy is it still fun in this film. Also similar to Castle in the Sky, but unfortunately on a less positive note, I don't think this film's villain is particularly compelling. He's just kinda generic, power-hungry creepo with a damsel in distress, not unlike Muska. I understand that this movie is pretty much playing these tropes straight just to have fun. It's not like they're trying to create a particularly depthful clash of ideologies between our hero and villain, and I'll be honest, it's the first time I've seen a classic master thief who commits crimes and saves lives when he feels like it just because he loves living on the edge, without any attempts at subverting tropes, probably because those tropes didn't exist yet in the late 70s, which I find valuable in its own right as a sort of time capsule. But for me, I think I would have preferred a little more going on with Lazare, I think that's how you pronounce that, the antagonist. I can totally get down with some good old childish fun, but I think for me, I can most easily get into that headspace when the directing, acting, animation, just the craftsmanship in general, are encouraging that experience. And I feel like at around the midpoint of the film, it starts presenting itself a little more seriously than I thought was necessary, though I think it picks back up pretty quickly. In fact, the third act contains some of the funniest moments in the film, in my opinion, like Jigen showing off his immaculate acting abilities.
What do you know? Printing presses! What could they be printing, I wonder?
And that actually reminds me, I feel like Jigen and the samurai guy don't get enough screen time. They're really fun characters, but all they really get to do is help Lupin get in the castle and then literally sit on the sideline. I wish they had more to do. Also, like I mentioned earlier, I tend to have a hard time just having fun with movies and shows over a long period of time unless they're either knocking it out of the park with comedy or animation or directing or something. And while Castle of Cagliostro does look really great and has a lot of standout moments, I wouldn't say it's actively engaging all the way through. Whenever characters are just kind of standing around and talking, I was disengaged, waiting for the next cool thing to happen, but I almost never had to wait too long, so it wasn't that big a deal. I also recognize that I'm viewing this film from the perspective of someone going through every Ghibli movie, but Castle of Cagliostro belongs to its own franchise and just has production overlap with Ghibli, so while I was watching it, I was definitely going to be more observant of the parallels that could be drawn between this movie and other Ghibli films than this movie and other Lupin films or TV shows. Actually, the only exposure I've had to anything Lupin related was that French Netflix original, which I actually liked a lot. I'd recommend it, but it is a very different type of story than the one presented in this movie. Still, it's cool to be able to see multiple different takes on the Lupin character, and from what I can gather, it seems like he's a sort of Sherlock Holmes or James Bond type entity insofar as how he's an actual real-life fictional character who is extremely well known, and seemingly in the public domain, which means that anyone could pick up this character they've known about their whole life and write their own stories with him, and I think that kind of stuff is super cool. Plus, it kind of creates that MCU effect where an established canon is built up over dozens and dozens of different movies, comic books, and TV shows, which probably makes it really fun and rewarding to follow all of the different iterations of. One more thing I gotta mention is that I really like that the hidden treasure the whole time was a flooded Roman city, because locations that aren't meant to be filled with water being filled with water is like my favorite idea for a setting by far. But I already gushed about why that is in my review of Ponyo, go watch that for elaboration. So yeah, overall I really liked Castle of Cagliostro. I thought it was a lot of fun, and extra note, this is one of the first anime I've seen from before the 1980s, and even in the 80s I've only seen a handful of stuff. And after watching this movie, I don't know, I'm feeling a little motivated to check out some old stuff. As always, I would love to hear what you thought of this film down in the comments. I'm feeling a decent 7 out of 10. And next time, I guess I'll be watching Panda Co. Panda, which is actually 2 30-minute episodes, but they're listed as movies, and Hayao Miyazaki worked on them, as well as Isao Takahata, who directed them, and I didn't realize how big of a figure he was in this company until I started this video series, and frankly, I just love making these. Anyway, have a good one, Patreon, and see you next time.